Welcome to another episode of Nutrapreneur, your go-to podcast for cutting-edge insights into the nutraceutical industry. I'm your host, Bethany. Today, we're so excited to welcome Dr. ElenaGross, the ingenious mind behind KetoSwiss. As a neuroscientist and former chronic migraine sufferer, Dr. Gross turned her personal challenges into a pioneering venture. KetoSwiss, a biotech firm based in Basel, Switzerland, focuses on developing a groundbreaking nutraceutical for the dietary preventive therapy of migraines and related neurological conditions. So let's go ahead and dive into the science and story behind this innovative approach. So, Dr. Gross, I think first it would be great for you to share with us the personal journey that led you from battling migraines to founding KetoSwiss.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It started basically with personal suffering, as I think in a few stories. I started to have migraine when I was about, I think, 14. I had just started the contraceptive pill for hormonal dysregulation reasons. So my gynecologist prescribed it to me as my period wasn't coming on as it should have, and I didn't make the connection at the time. Nobody diagnosed me with migraine for about a year. So I had these really bad one-sided headaches. And my dad told me just go to sleep, stop whining because I thought I was being a difficult teenager. And the doctors just weren't taking me seriously. It took about a year. And from then onwards, when I finally had a diagnostic and it wasn't just a psychological issue, I was just trying to look for answers. And it was constantly getting worse at the point at what neurologists and specialists would be prescribing antidepressant medication, anticonvulsant medication, and all the hardcore stuff. That didn't work. My parents spent a good chunk of their savings sending me to acupuncturists, to Buddhist monks, and whatever, like trying alternative approaches. That didn't do much either. And when I eventually realized halfway through my degree in psychology, when my migraine turned chronic, which means over 15 days a month, so over 50% of time in pain, I realized I would never be able to do a normal job anyway. So I might as well try and use my academic or my work life to understand this condition better, and was very lucky to get a scholarship to start studying neuroscience. And I did 2 master's projects on migraine, and then towards the end stumbled across something that made so much sense and gave me eventually my brain back way earlier than I had ever hoped for. So I did my PhD in Basel on the topic. In Oxford at the time, they said it's way too risky. There's no data. You can't do it here. So if you want to stay, you have to do some neuroimaging project on migraine. So I ditched Oxford and ended up in Basel, Switzerland, which is a tiny but a very beautiful place. And there I could actually, in a side project, start on this whole metabolic migraine idea and trying to improve metabolism for improving migraine. And at the time I was starting my PhD, I was looking into this. The pilot data was looking promising. And then I thought, well, I'm only a scientist, right? I can do the research, I can maybe write the patent, and then somebody else has to do it and bring it to the patients for me. So I went to Novartis and like the big, so in Basel, you have these huge bio pharmaceuticals, and they were just laughing at me because it was early stage and it was endogenous molecules. And so eventually, this was a long-winded story. Eventually, I founded KetoSwiss as a way to basically jump in the cold water and bring this to patients like myself. And that was 2019, I think, when I finished my PhD and finally went to KetoSwiss full time. And that's how it all went. From pain turned into passion, and now fighting, and I guess nutripreneur, or how you would call it, an entrepreneur in the whole food space. So the whole idea of food being medicine, if you've been a patient yourself, right, you feel strongly about not getting all of the side effects of traditional drugs, and especially if it's prevention where you have to take something every day, you don't want the side effects to be worse than the actual efficacy. And that's one of the real driving forces. And maybe forwarding to today, I have like 1 day of migraine a month left from 20. So, and then I really know that I overdid it. So we will dive into the whole theory of what I think is migraine and why it's happening at a later stage, I think. But yeah, so I can really say gave me my brain back and my life in return as well.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible journey, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about all of this because I know there's a lot of migraine sufferers and they haven't found what works for them. And I think, it'd be great to hear more about, you said you had an academic background in neuroscience, and how did that and your clinical research fuel your quest for alternative migraine treatments?
Yeah, so I guess I was lucky that I was, at least at the time when it became chronic, I was in psychology. So psychology is still quite far removed from neuroscience, but it was at least the brain, right? So it was the right organ already. And then in England, I studied in England. I was also lucky that at the time you could switch quite broadly between fields. So a psychology degree in a bachelor's degree would allow me to move into neuroscience in my master's degree. So in that sense, I had the academic possibility to go into this full force and study that. And I think if you're a patient at a different age or you have a completely different background, it's way harder than it was for me to try and get the academic expertise to really move the needle in a field. So that was an extreme blessing. And then in my PhD as well, I had the unfortunate situation that my supervisor, my original supervisor, left the country. But that meant I had to find myself a different supervisor, and I had the possibility to look for alternative ways to get this funded all over the world. So I was writing to world experts, and some were even replying. So I got a lot of tuition and knowledge and mentorship from people in my PhD that I learned so much from, that maybe that I wouldn't have been otherwise able to acquire such knowledge myself, or would have taken years, right? So I really think that being in the right field helped me to really not only look for but actually find a potential solution, right? So I mean, you can always look for things, but having a bit of the right background, or at least being able to move into the right background, helped me find solutions. For one, I was intrinsically super motivated to make a change because it wasn't a life worth living, and on the other hand, I had some of the tools that others don't have to explore the field and find a solution. So
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. Yeah, that's great. And, given the complex landscape of neurological diseases, what challenges did you face in the initial stages of developing your nutraceutical product?
yeah, so that's a good question as well. So originally, I thought this could be a drug, with all so you can do all the labeling and all the claims you want and develop this through phase 3, but that needs a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of traditional investors to come on board, right? So if you think about how acute diseases are handled today, you have a small molecule that is developed, right? That's a one target, it targets one receptor or maybe one pathway, but it's usually even much more narrow. And that's how we treat pain, which is a symptom of migraine, but that's also how we treat some antibiotics or some acute problems that we might have. And now what pharma is doing is trying to generalize the acute small molecule approach to preventing common civilization diseases. And migraine, with 1 billion people in the world, biggest disabler amongst women and second biggest disabler across all cultures and genders worldwide, right? That is not an issue that is an acute small receptor problem that we can solve. Same with Alzheimer and other common very big diseases. I don't think the model that pharma has devised for really helping us in an acute situation, really saving lives in an acute problem, is not really generalizing to the preventative setting that we need so urgently for many civilization problems that we're facing as humans today. So now I was there, I had something that I really think in a preventative way would work, at least in a subgroup of patients. But if I wanted to turn this into a drug, I would have to have significant funding from people that are believing in the small molecule, novel molecule approach. Now here I am with something that could be qualified as food or nutraceutical, whatever you want to call it. It's endogenous safe molecules, which from a patient perspective is like, that's amazing. It doesn't have any side effects. But from the investor pharma person is like, oh, but this doesn't have a compound of matter protection. This only has medical use patent protection. That's not strong enough. We don't know it. I don't know that we're not funding this. So actually, the complexity was in neurology, everything has failed, which I think for good reason. It's single target approaches for a complex problem that will never work. Paired with this, oh, it should be one small target, and you're proposing something that changes hundreds of pathways at the same time, and you need to take 20 grams a day, and it's endogenous molecules. So this didn't match the drug development that was at the time, at least how it's been done. The field is changing, but that was a challenge. And then eventually I stumbled across something that sits between the supplement and the drug world. And it's that regulatory category in the US that is called medical food. And in Europe, it's called food for special medical purposes. Now, and this was the perfect solution, the niche that we needed, because that still allows us to say migraine. We can say for the dietary management of migraine, it's a product against migraine, but it's safe. It's let food be thy medicine in a category. It requires way less investments because you don't need phase 3 trials. We can already launch in the US in about April, so spring 2024, which is soon. So we can get to patients way quicker, and there's still regulatory hurdles. We still needed trials, but it's not as strict as a drug. And it's, I think, the perfect compromise for us. So we kind of turned that complexity or issue into a solution thanks to that category.
Yeah, a lot of challenges along the way, but a very positive
Sure.
outcome. So
Sure.
that's great. And you are a very strong advocate for therapeutic benefits of ketosis and neurological conditions. So how does ketosis play a role in migraine prevention and brain health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So by now you probably have asked, what is the solution? What are they even doing, right? So the strong belief was at first, the first thing you need to realize is migraine is 1 billion people in the world, right? And it's so common. That means if something has been preserved, migraine genetics have been as preserved as in this case, it seems unlikely that this was an accident of nature. So if migraine was just a random deleterious or a bad mutation, right, we wouldn't have it so much today. So what is the evolutionary advantage then of migraine, or what was at least the evolutionary advantage? And if you look at what a migraine attack does, is it forces you to rest, right? Light hurts, noise hurts, smells make it worse. Any sensory stimulation makes it worse. Moving makes it worse. So patients are literally forced to go and withdraw in a dark room. They rest, they don't move, they don't do anything that spends more energy. So you could say migraine is an energy conserving behavior. It's really like this pulling the plug when energy in the brain has been completely depleted, let's say. And there's quite a lot of evidence actually to support that hypothesis, which is that even between attacks, if you look at in brain scans, if you look at migraineurs versus healthy control, or migraine patients, I should say, then even at rest between attacks, migraine patients have about 16% less energy in the brain to a healthy control, even when they don't have a migraine. And there's a lot of evidence that migraine comes with so-called mitochondrial dysfunction. So the energy producing factories of the cells are not working as efficiently. You have increased oxidative stress. Oxidative stress are these free radicals, these bombs that again destroy the powerhouses in the cell, that destroy or make energy production so much worse. You have hyperexcitability in the brain, which means that the brain is actually spending more energy, it doesn't habituate. So, and when a healthy person looks at or normal person, I don't know what you want to call, a non-migraine patient looks at a white wall, it will stop firing, right? Because it only encodes for change. It saves the energy if nothing is changing. A migraine's brain will not stop firing. It will continue to fire, thereby spending more energy. And if you look back at, say, 10,000 plus years ago, you might still think, like, why would you make such energy wasting brains? Would that make any sense? Like, why do these migraineurs exist that spend constantly so much energy? And 10,000 years back, I think it would make sense. So every 7th person in the world has the migraine genetics that are coming with these overactive, energy-hungry brains. But if you think about a tribe lying around a campfire, 40 people or so, every 7, so 4 of them might have these hyperexcitable brains that are spending more energy, but they would be the ones saving the tribe when the tiger is coming at night, because they are so hypersensitive or hyperactive, right? So it would come at a cost, but at a benefit for humans. And back then, we would still have a completely different energy metabolism. So 10,000 years back, there would still be periods where we would only be either fasting entirely because it's winter, there's not much around. We would be eating bone marrow primarily as a human species, bone marrow, meats. All of this stuff would turn on the production of a very efficient alternative energy source for the brain that is called ketone body. Ketone body is a small fatty acid that can, instead of glucose or in addition to glucose, fuel the brain very effectively with less of this oxidative stress, which is damaging you. So a bit like a clean fuel, like solar energy or a wind power. And it would also be able to feed these energy demanding migraine brains. Now, we also would have a lot of micronutrients around, a lot of minerals in the spring water. We would have a lot of plants around that still have magnesium trace minerals. We would have antioxidants in the leaves, in the original fruits and vegetables, how they were looking like. The soils were full of trace minerals, not depleted, right? So we would have a different macronutrient to sustain the brain, but we would also have all these micronutrients, antioxidants, and so on that also would help the energy metabolism in those migraine brains to function at a level that it could sustain a very energy demanding brain. Now, this was a very long-winded explanation, but coming back to today, our soils are depleted, our vegetables and fruit, if we're even eating them, don't have so much in them anymore. And we're basically feeding off carbohydrates the whole time. So this alternative energy source is not even made in the liver anymore. Now, what basically KetoSwiss does in their first product is called MigraKete, which is that migraine medical food, is we're reintroducing those ketone bodies, this ancient fuel source, mixed with so many different trace minerals, vitamins, antioxidants that have been shown to be migraine protective in clinical trials. We put all of that in one product, a medical food product for the dietary management of migraine. Take it twice a day, and that will feed your brain enough basically to reduce or to help you manage migraine.
Yeah. No.
And that's how all of this plays together, or that's how all of this came about. This will not, I must say, this will not help everyone. So what we did, we defined, and it's early days, needs to be replicated, but in the first trial in Basel on 40 patients crossover, meaning they were their own control. It's about 80 patients, parallel design, if you want to compare that, is we found that there might be a metabolic migraine subgroup where really metabolism is at the root cause. So this malfunctioning metabolism is turning on the migraine if there's an energy deficit, to warn us about it and to conserve energy until energy homeostasis has been restored. And this won't be everyone. We know there's hormonal or menstrual migraine where mainly hormones are out of whack and the migraine might be warning about hormonal deficiency. But in that case where, say, malfunctioning metabolism is at the root cause, then MigraKete can help manage that migraine with nutrition, basically. Yeah, feeding the brain.
Yeah.
Without side effects or without systemic side effects. You might get, worst thing is there's minerals in there, so you might get a bit of diarrhea initially if you're not used to it, but that's about as bad as it gets.
This episode is brought to you by NutraPayments.com. If your business needs credit card processing that fully integrates with most major Nutra software platforms, offers the lowest industry prices, and has built-in features like recurring billing, $0 trials, and chargeback prevention, then visit us at NutraPayments.com for a free online quote. KetoSwiss emphasizes the importance of mitochondrial functioning and energy metabolism, like you said. And so can you explain how this focus differentiates your products from other treatments?
Yes, so what we have in migraine is typically everything revolves around the most bothersome symptom, I would say, which is the pain, right? So I guess the pain is the most crippling. There's many other disabling symptoms, but everything we have in migraine in the drug space, even this new, what they call migraine injection, these injections that are monoclonal antibodies, which are basically binding against a receptor or acting against a molecule, a neuropeptide that hurts. It's called CGRP. I don't know if you've heard about this Amy Wog and these others. If there's a migraine patient listening, they might have. Even that is a chronic painkiller. It's inhibiting pain. And then we have the triptans. That's an own class of very strong analgesics, basically, for migraine-specific ones. They are also, I mean, they're lifesavers. I know from experience. They will reduce the pain when you need to function. But they're all pain medications, a symptomatic treatment. So you can think of it like a plaster or a crutch. It's not healing the bone and it's not healing the wound, but it's helping you. And it's not the root cause. So we are, I believe, one of the only ones. There's now a company in Germany, a startup that looks at blood glucose monitoring, which goes in a similar direction. But compared to most things in migraine, we are fixing metabolism or working on metabolism, which is not yet really on the horizon for most pharmaceutical companies. And even in the International Headache Society meetings, I was at the last big congress, International Headache Society Congress. And there, for the first time, there was like a whole talk presenting also our research on metabolism, like half an hour on migraine and metabolism. That's the first time on like a 4-day congress, like half an hour is metabolism. So it's really not at the forefront. And we're fighting for this to come out more, that really metabolism in migraine is a huge issue. And the beauty is we cannot change the neurological hardwiring in the brain yet. We cannot change genetics wide stream just yet. That might come in a few decades or 100 years, but we can fix metabolism. We can. And that's just a great news. And I guess that's a lot of what you guys are talking about here on this Nutrapreneur podcast is also is about nutrition. And that's something which is so powerful and overlooked, and where we can do something today, right? Not even tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nutrition is always an effective approach for most things. So I think it's
Yeah.
great that you've been able to take that concept and utilize it to help migraine sufferers. And with KetoSwiss leading in innovative migraine prevention, how do you see the role of nutraceuticals evolving in neurology and overall health span?
Yeah, so I wish I could say it's out there a lot and I see it everywhere, but I don't think we're there yet. So if you look at traditional ways how things are treated, it's you go to a standard medical doctor, no matter what condition you have. They don't even check your blood for deficiencies in anything, right? They check your standard. Even the big blood test in Germany doesn't involve most of the minerals or any of the vitamins. What has come a bit on the radar is vitamin D, so that's sometimes checked now. And then even in the therapy, in the migraine space, riboflavin B2 is commonly at least looked at least it's in the guidelines. Then there's CoQ10, which is an antioxidant that's also in our product, as well as potentially sometimes magnesium. With children, they try this sometimes, and it depends on the doctor. So some doctors do have those three on the horizon at least, but some will always try medication before they try something as weak as that. And when I was little, I was also very skeptical. I was like, well, how can a magnesium help something as bad as migraine, right? It didn't feel like it was in proportion. But I think we are slowly getting there, that even with COVID, sometimes, vitamin C infusions, they have tried it, but it seems still to be like the last resort, rather than let's try everything nutrition first. Let's try everything non-drug first. And if that doesn't work, we turn to the drug, right? It's more like, let's try every drug first. And if we haven't killed the patient and they're not better, maybe then let's try something like a nutritional approach. And I don't know if you know about epilepsy, where the whole ketotic intervention started. The ketogenic therapy started with epilepsy. And even there, it's like, let's try the drugs first. And if none of this works, then we try the diet. It's slowly changing. People are talking about more, but I really think it's more a grassroots movement. It's
Yeah.
the patient that hears about it through podcasts like this. They go to the doctor and say, wait a minute, can we not try something different first? Can we try that nutraceutical, or can we try that infusion, or whatever it may be? For the diet.
I think a lot of patients, like you said, are educating themselves and trying
Yeah.
to be an advocate for themselves, because a lot
Yes.
of people, I mean, I know, especially when you're talking about like the pain medications, I don't think people want to be taking pain medicine their entire lives just to kind of be this crutch that's not actually resolving the issue.
Yeah, and it comes with issues down the line. And for me, I've only only taken strong painkillers and medication for about a decade or two, or a decade and a half, 15 years. And yet my liver is still struggling, right? My liver is still suffering today. So it's not like you can pop this like candy. I mean, maybe you can like candy, because candy is bad for you too. Your liver will struggle as well. Maybe that's even a good analogy, right? So it's like overeating candy, overeating medication will also be, basically taxing your body, and will come with further side effects, or organ failure, or problems that you then have to take other medications for, that will damage other things further down the line, right? And I don't want to sound anti-drug. When I get a migraine, I still take painkillers because it's terrible, right? And I want to sleep. I'm just saying that it cannot be the preventative approach. It cannot be what you use to manage your migraine on a daily basis. It must be the crutch, and only used occasionally.
Right. And you hold 4 patents and have contributed significantly to migraine research. So, what's next in the pipeline for KetoSwiss that listeners can look forward to?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, we have a whole pipeline plan. So we're now launching the Migraine medical food, but we are already moving into mental health. So we have a clinical trial that already has started using a Migraine similar medical food, but it's designed for depression and potentially other metabolic issues that we can look into. And the holy grail in the long term is cognition and aging. So we want to go from very niche, one indication at a time, aging, Alzheimer's, potentially, where also we know there's potentially a subgroup of patients where metabolism is at the root cause, and hence we can help manage those conditions nutritionally, potentially with an alternative solution. And what we're currently doing, which is the most exciting, is because we have listened to all of these investors that are skeptical of human identical molecules, is that we're with a partner, we have built a novel molecule which basically does bind safe substances together in a way that creates a novel molecule, but that is already spliced in the gut into these human identical or safe food molecules, so that we know that most likely safety is not an issue. And it's molecules we know, but we have this new molecular entity that can be patented and well respected by investors.
Yeah,
so that will be
very exciting.
down the line. Yes.
And for any individuals and entrepreneurs interested in exploring nutraceuticals for neurological diseases, what advice would you offer based on your experiences?
That's a very big one. Now, the first warning there is what I didn't know going into this space is that supplements or nutraceuticals are not equal in quality. But what does that even mean? We're all aware of that. But what I found out in my research is that actually 95% or 90 to 95% of supplements are actually not using bioidentical versions of molecules. This may sound benign, but for a patient, for example, this means there's 4 different versions of B12. A cheap, not as high quality supplement will tell you only B12, will not even say what form it is. But for example, cyanocobalamin will be spliced into cyanamide, and the cobalamin, which is the B12, it may be a not very bioavailable version, but it may also even have toxic consequences in somebody who's very sensitive, because the cyanamide, I don't know how you say it in English properly, but that needs to be detoxified. Now, the same goes for almost every single vitamin. There's bioactive versions, meaning that's the version your body can take and run with and go and use directly in your cells, in your mitochondria, wherever it's needing that micronutrient. It can just put it in and use it effectively. If you have non-bioactive substances, they are not as absorbed as readily, but they can also inhibit the absorption of the good stuff. So you may even be making matters worse by blocking the action of the bioidentical one. It's a bit like, we have heard about this a lot in the bioidentical hormone space, which is also for me where it started. I have hypothyroidism, and I was giving synthetic artificial hormones, and they triggered a migraine every time. I could not take thyroid hormones. What I didn't know at the time, I was like 14, is that they gave me a molecule that is like a thyroid hormone, but it's structurally different to an endogenous hormone, a thyroid hormone. So my body, my migraine was always trying to protect me. It was turning on the migraine and saying, we can't have this. This is causing something odd. We don't want it. So so I was taking the bioidentical thyroid hormone, no migraines at all. And I take them ever since, like for 5 years now. I figured this out. This is great. The same exists similar to supplements, to any vitamins, trace minerals. Try to find supplements that have the bioactive, the bioidentical hormone equivalent of the vitamin. And then you can really do your body a favor and make things better, rather than just making expensive pee or even decreasing absorption of the good stuff.
Yes, that's great advice. And, our conversation today has really illuminated the fascinating intersection between nutrition, neuroscience, and nutraceuticals. So once again, Dr. Gross, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work KetoSwiss is doing in the realm of migraine prevention and even beyond that. Listeners, to learn more about KetoSwiss, check out the links we provided. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts on today's topic. Join us next time on Nutrapreneur as we continue to explore the innovations shaping the nutraceutical industry. Until then, stay informed and inspired.